So this right here is the AliExpress Gamma that we bought maybe 5 to 6 months ago. So right here you can see it still hashing, and we also have a new heatsink on it. So this is the Ice Tower heatsink. We originally are going to be going through basically kind of how it's been for the last 6 months, and then we'll talk about the experience of it and other things, I guess. Just kind of an updated video on the AliExpress or Bitaxe Gamma AliExpress version. So one of the main things that I talk about in the video, or at least the first video, we're going to be going over that as well, is the build quality. But before we get into all of that, I want to thank the sponsor of this video, Crypto Miner Bros.
Since 2018, CryptoMinerBros.com has been the premier site for top-tier crypto mining hardware, earning the trust of miners across the globe. The prices displayed on their site cover shipping and DDP straight to your doorstep, ensuring no unexpected costs at checkout. They deliver to over 100 countries and even provide lower invoicing options to help you cut down on customs fees. Payment is a breeze with options like direct bank transfer or cryptocurrencies including Bitcoin, USDT, or Ethereum. With over 250 ASIC options, they stock some of the channel's favorites like the Bitaxe Touch, and the Avalon Nano 3S. Join tens of thousands of happy customers who rely on CryptoMinerBros.com for dependable hardware fulfillment, clear pricing, and a top-notch service. Check out CryptoMinerBros.com today, link in the description.
So as I said, the build quality on this is slightly worse, I would say. Firstly, that sticker, the void sticker, I don't think there's actually any warranty on it regardless. So that originally had a warranty sticker on it. And then in terms of the actual board, I was saying that it kind of looks cheap, at least like the holes that were drilled in here and over here. There was kind of some sparred bits that were coming out. And I got a lot of hate actually on this original video because people were saying it's cheap enough that a lot of people can afford it compared to the other prices of Bitaxe Gammas. But since then, I think they've actually been coming down in price, so that's actually a good sign to see. Originally, as I said, it had a different heatsink on it, but we have put the low profile or the Ice Tower, I don't know what it's called, and that is 3D printed through here. I would try flip it over, but it's currently hashing away right now. Everything's actually been okay with it. The ESP is slightly different, as you can see, or not even on that one, I don't think. But there's an ESP on that one, and it doesn't have this little thing by here, but I'm sure that's just where they sourced the parts from. Apart from that, nothing else was really any different. So the original heatsink, we have it right here. The reason that we replaced it is because this heatsink wasn't actually that great. Mainly due to the fact that this is very thin, so these were bending a little bit. So these fins right here, and the bottom of it, this wasn't great either, I didn't feel like, in terms of the contact to the chip. So you'd want it flushed, but this has slight grooves in it, which I don't know, maybe that's part of the manufacturing. And then the second kind of, or third thing is these spring pins. They weren't great because they can move around like that. So they didn't have particularly the correct pressure on the actual chip on the bottom. Even there you can see that it's a different layer from the actual heatsink. So this layer, this thin part, is not actually within the heatsink. Does that make sense? It's kind of stuck on the bottom of it, as you can see there. So that's the main thing that kind of stuck out, was firstly the heatsink. The fan was also very loud as well compared to the normal ones that I'd get. But the only other real big reason or big thing to point out was this barrel jack that you see here. Typically we had it for this size, which is I believe the large size, but these came in the smaller size, so you can't fit that into there. So if anyone knows why that's different, please let me know. But yeah, we do have a video. We'll kind of throw it to the computer now, but you can kind of see just on our screen here how it looked. So you had the sticker right there, you still had the LCD, the ESP was a little bit different, and then this is the original fan with the original heatsink underneath. So one thing, this shroud right here that you see here is typically used on ASIC miners. So I actually wanted one of these to be put on, but I didn't have enough or the space for the screws to actually go through. So it's a little bit different than what we have over there now. We've kind of changed things up on it, but it has been running very well. So we'll head over to the actual screen now and we'll go through kind of what we've been doing with it over the past 6 months and how it runs, what overclocks we're using, what watts we're pulling, and other things like that.
So we have actually renamed it since the time that we set it up. So we renamed it to Bitaxe Gamma AliExpress version. If we just click in here, we can actually open it up. So we've allocated it a purple color. If you didn't know, on the channel, we kind of changed the color for each individual device, just so if you're watching this in the future and you've kind of kept up with the videos, you'll know which Bitaxe we're looking at without having to kind of sift through and see. But normally you can kind of tell based on the hash rate right there. So for the whole time that we've been running this, our best difficulty that we've ever hit is 1.21G. So not particularly that high necessarily, but still it's kind of typical of what you'd see out of a Bitaxe that was running for maybe 4 to 5 months. But it is luck on the network after all. Now the ASIC temperature and the voltage regulator temperature, those are 55.9 for the ASIC temperature and around 59 for the voltage regulator. The voltage regulator actually is better, I believe, than the Gamma that we first ever got. I don't know why the parts are better, but maybe it's the way that we're handling the heat of the actual voltage regulator. But for the most part, I did trash it in the first video that we did. But since then, I've kind of come around and, you know, it's a good miner overall. There's nothing particularly wrong with it. And the only reason that you really wouldn't want to buy one is because you're not supporting the whole open source Bitaxe movement. But apart from that, it's an overall good miner. It's still been running, and we've had pretty much no problems with it for the past 6 months. The power is around 20 watts. It's slightly higher, but I think that's the heatsink is not doing as much work. Just because the one thing I did mention about the holes being drilled into the board, or however they're cut out, are not as perfect as you see on other Bitaxes. So where the spring pin is actually going in to the board, it's slightly out of alignment. So that's why I think it's less efficient in terms of how much power it's pulling on these overclocks, because it's not making the best contact with the actual chip underneath because they're slightly off. So the spring pins are clipping onto a different angle at each point on the board. So when it comes to overclocking, we have a frequency of 575 and a core voltage of 1100. As I said, it has been kind of going steadily for the past 6 months, and there's not really been anything wrong with it. We haven't really seen too many Bitaxes fail necessarily in the whole community that I've been seeing, at least not in a drastic way, where I know I saw one where a Bitaxe was burnt out in terms of it actually set on fire and it looked like it had been charred. But apart from that, I haven't seen many that are kind of overly a risk. That was the main thing when I was talking about in the first video, was the risk of fire in case the components weren't great. But it looks to be like the components are great. And a lot of people mentioned in the comments that a lot of the components on there are the same ones that other manufacturers are buying in regardless. So I've definitely learned a lot in terms of how these are manufactured over the past 6 months. I believe there's only a couple of actual manufacturers that manufacture the Bitaxes overall, and then the places that sell them buy from those manufacturers. So it's a little bit different. I didn't fully understand that. I thought that everyone was making their own ones, kind of buying the components, getting them made, and then actually physically assembling it themselves, but that's not necessarily the case. And then when it comes to actually buying it, I believe that we bought it for, I think, $105, but we can see how much they're going for these days. So there are cheaper ones out there now. Mainly when we looked on the first video, everything, or the cheapest that we could, was $105 or pounds, whichever one. And you couldn't get it cheaper than that, but it looks like there are cheaper ones out there. This one's going for £80, which is probably $100. And there's cheaper ones than that at 98. I want to see how much it is in price. So 79 is the lowest that you can get, looking like here. And they all kind of look the same at how our packaging came in. So you can see that box in the first video. We had that box with the manual. But there's other models out there, even this white version, the white paper version that we've seen from some suppliers. Those are actually being sold as well. So it's interesting to see the copying of them. And then if we actually go back one more step, you can see that the main thing when you type in Bitaxe on AliExpress is actually the Nerd QX. So I'm assuming a lot of people are buying these from AliExpress as well. And it looks like they're going for around £200 to £300, which is maybe $350. And normally you can get one for around $420 in mainly the US vendors. You even have stuff like the Hydro version. This is obviously not the official Hydro version, but there is variations of this going on as you go down, which is also very interesting to see, because I'm sure that the heat sinks or the Hydro version of it is actually okay, but the actual board is not necessarily the best quality that is out there. Now it also brings into question the chips. Where are the chips coming from? Because there's a myriad of Bitaxe miners that are on AliExpress, and I'm assuming that the chips are coming from within China, because that's mainly where AliExpress's seller base is all based. So I'm assuming they're coming from there, and due to the open source nature of it, it's kind of inevitable that you'll see a bunch of these miners across AliExpress, or even, what's the other website that you see? I'm trying to think of the name. Or even on Temu, which is kind of like the same thing as AliExpress. But overall, probably if you were to buy one of these, they probably would be fine. I mean, I'm not going to necessarily buy one for the Nerd QX. I feel like that's a lot of money to put on one when we already have two and we don't want to run another one for the electricity price. But overall, across the 6 months, it's actually been very, very good to run. I haven't encountered any problems. The efficiency is slightly higher, so it's a little bit less efficient than the other ones, but I don't know why that is. Maybe it's just the silicon lottery on the chip, but it seems like the voltage regulator temperature is actually better than the other ones. But as I said, the voltage regulator, for whatever reason, the temperature is way better than the other Bitaxe Gamma that we have, the first one that we ever bought. So you can kind of see a comparison here. You have the AliExpress one, which is sitting at 55 and 59, and then this Bitaxe Gamma, which is sitting at 59 and 72 on the voltage regulator, which is actually pretty high comparative to the other Gammas that we see. So we have the AliExpress one and the one from Power Mining, which is pretty much bang on the same temperature. So I'm assuming that they're using better components to get this down in comparison to whatever components were used on the first Gamma that we got. But it seems like the components on the AliExpress one are actually okay. Now personally, would I be buying a Nerd QX? Obviously I've said no, but if you're not worried about kind of the decentralization of Bitcoin mining, then if you're just looking for hash rate, it's probably a better price. One thing I do want to note about the buying from AliExpress as well is potentially there could be some sort of malware on the Bitaxe that connects to your network, something along those lines. Nobody has really done any further research into it, and also when you actually hit a block, because nobody has really hit a block on an AliExpress Bitaxe, we would never know if something in the background is actually going to take that block. So it's interesting to see, but for the most part, I think it's actually okay. Now the malware is kind of up to interpretation. You could get one from one supplier and it has no malware, and then you could get it from another supplier which does have malware. As you can see, there's a lot of suppliers out there that are selling Bitaxes and Nerdaxes and Nerd QXs. Even the Lucky Miners are on AliExpress as well. But I think that the company that makes them is actually in China, so that kind of makes sense. And then we've just got more as we go down. So this is maybe potentially the same heatsink that we were using at the start. But this is just a quick little update video on the Bitaxe Gamma AliExpress. It's been doing okay. Personally, if you really want the hash rate, it's a good buy if you can save the $20. but it does take a while to get here. So that's the only downside, is it takes a while. And I don't know what the tariff kind of situation is with America, but in the UK it's not as bad as the tariffs in America, so it might be beneficial maybe if you're in the UK or Europe to buy from there. And then if you're in the US, just go and support some US company that actually makes them. So if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more content like this.